All right, so this right here is the Meze Astru, and it's a high-end single dynamic driver IEM that comes in at expensive. But I wanted to do a video highlighting why it is that people hear IEMs so differently, or at least demonstrating that. I've talked about this in the past, and I recently did a members live stream testing the Astru, and as part of that live stream testing process, I made use of our individual anatomy reference points for myself and for Griffin to show just how differently each of us is going to hear these IEMs. And I figured, regardless of whether or not the Astru is for you, which maybe it is, maybe it isn't, this is important information that people need to see. So that's what today's video is going to be about. Okay, a quick disclaimer here. This unit was provided by Meze for me to check out. Big thanks to Meze for sending it in for review. They, of course, haven't asked me to say anything about it. They haven't paid me to say anything about it. All thoughts and opinions here are my own. So this is Meze's latest high-end single dynamic driver IEM. It's a beautiful design. It's small and comfortable. It fits well in the ear. This is one of my favorite looking designs because it doesn't really draw attention to itself. It goes for that classy, sleek kind of aesthetic rather than the ridiculous and gaudy stuff that you commonly see in high-end IEMs. Shots fired. You also get this interesting wishbone style Y-split with this unique kind of design to it. There's really nothing else for me to say about this other than the cable feels nice. It's ergonomic. I have no issues with any of this. So let's talk about the sound quality. We've done a lot to understand how our heads and ears impact sound, and we can apply this to understanding in-ear headphone performance better than ever before. And so I want to show you guys what that actually looks like. Before doing that, I have to give you guys an explanation for the data that you're about to see. So ordinarily when we measure in-ear headphones, we measure on the B&K 5128. You might be familiar with the 4620. This is going to give you the same information. The reason why IEMs are difficult for people is because the pinna, the outer ear, is being bypassed. So the fleshy part of the ear here is being bypassed when you're inserting IEMs into the ear. That means the impact of these features on the sound needs to be assumed by the device because that's part of what your brain expects to hear. You can't expect that any measurement rig is going to perfectly predict your ear effects at your eardrum. The bigger picture here is that this is why IEMs are a much more personal choice. Now, what we've been able to do is we've been able to go to a lab in the UK to get our HRTF, to understand how our anatomy impacts sound. And this allows us to take our pinna effects and apply it to the baseline that we use for the B&K 5128. So this means that when we are graphing IEMs, we're able to now get the picture of how the IEM performs relative to what our brains expect given how our anatomy impacts sound. We can literally see how we are hearing these products in ways that we were never able to do so before. So here's the Meze Astru measured on the B&K 5128. This is how most people are likely going to hear this product, and I'm going to describe it as a somewhat V-shaped kind of sound signature. It's got a little bit of extra bass down low. It's got a forward character in the mids around 1 to 1.5 kilohertz, and then it's got some forward and slightly esoteric treble coming through, a little bit on the fatiguing side and a couple of spots there. And given these colorations, I do expect this to be something that's reasonably well received for things like detail and dynamics and sense of impact and texture and all of that stuff at the cost of some colorations and being quirky for the timbre and also being a bit on the fatiguing side. Now, that's again how this sounds relative to a population average baseline. Now, let me show you what it sounds like when I substitute my own anatomical features in for that baseline, my own ear instead of a generic population average ear. This is how I'm actually hearing this IEM. And when I do tone generation with a manual tone generator sweeping along to listen to this IEM, this is exactly how I hear it. It tracks bang on. What does this sound like? Well, again, it sounds W-shaped, just with meaningful colorations and fatiguing characteristics in the treble that are not fun. I do not like the way that this sounds, straight up. And that's because it sounds very fatiguing in the low to mid treble and then very dark for the rest of the mid treble and upper treble. I mean, it comes back, of course, in the upper treble, but it sounds very compressed as a result of how much emphasis there is to lower portions of the treble that dominate over the rest of the response. Now, once again, that is how I'm hearing this relative to the anatomical baseline that we have for me. What if I substitute somebody else's anatomical features in? What if I substitute somebody else's ear into this system? Conveniently, we have several other people who went to the lab in the UK who got their HRTFs as well. Here's how Griffin on our team hears this IEM. You'll notice that it's a little bit more forgiving in the low treble and mid treble, but good lord, look at the upper treble. And now here is how Cameron hears this IEM, and you'll see that it's different once again. And the nice thing about this is that apart from being reliant on the BNK5 and 2/8 canal transfer function, which again we don't need to get into in this video, I'm able to predict with a very high degree of confidence how other people on our team are going to hear this IEM. The Astru goes meaningfully out of bounds in a couple of spots for me, enough that it makes it rather difficult to listen to, and even though it might sound impactful and detailed and textured for certain elements, it also causes cymbals to sound compressed and percussion to sound timbrally skewed and slightly wrong, and it's enough quirky and colored that I would struggle to listen to this for any length of time. And I feel that the general tuning for this IEM is one that doesn't sufficiently err on the side of caution for people where some of these areas might be out of bounds. But as I just showed, you might be the kind of person where your pinna effects are imparting something that's a little bit more normal than the sound signature that this is imparting for me, or for Griffin, or for Cameron. I still think it's worth being critical of the sound signature if you find something that you don't like, but I think the key takeaway for this that I hope that folks take from this is that really what I'm describing here is my experience. I'm not describing the product, because the product could be different depending on the person. What I'm describing is how my experience is with the product. And for that, I can say with confidence that this isn't great. But I can't say with confidence that the product itself is bad. That's something that you unfortunately are just going to have to figure out a way to listen to yourself. And speaking of which, this is where headphones.com is meant to be helpful, because they have a ridiculous 365-day return policy. And as always, these videos are made possible by headphones.com. So if you value what we do here, consider checking them out the next time you're in the market for a new pair of headphones or IEMs or any other audio equipment. Now, as with the other reviews that we put out on this channel, I'm going to give the Astru a ranking out of 10. For the bass, I like this a lot. It hits with a ton of authority. It's a lot of fun. A little bit emphasized, but I like that. The mid-range is a bit quirky, but I don't mind that it's a bit more forward in that 1 to 2 kilohertz range. The treble is really difficult for me. I find it almost intolerable, and you saw why in the measured results. And so for me, this IEM gets a 4 out of 10. But as you saw with the differences in how this actually is going to be heard by people, this is why we have multiple people giving their rankings and ratings for different products. And so you can find that up on headphones.com. I'll leave a link to that in the description. Anyways, I hope this has been interesting and informative. For me, when we started doing this HRTF testing and comparison with our own HRTFs and then doing tone generation to confirm that this is exactly how we hear these products, it was like a light went off in my brain to be like, this is sound quality. This is the best way to understand sound quality. So I hope that this is stuff that you guys also find sufficiently interesting and valuable. Maybe it's not. Maybe you just want me to talk all about the technicalities and tell you all about how resolving a thing is. I'm just tired of all of that. I just feel that that's not a very good characterization of any of this stuff. It stopped making sense to me a long time ago. Quite frankly, this stuff is way more interesting because it's real. Okay, that's going to do it for this video. As always, you can connect with me at our forum at forum.headphones.com or in a Discord also linked below. Until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye for now.